Hello everyone, my name is Ioanna Salmonidis. Welcome to Victorian Opera's web series, 15 Years of New Opera. The Baroque genre of opera, known as pasticcio or pastiche opera, became very popular with composers, singers and audiences in the 18th century. Composers of the time would borrow music written by others and set it to an existing or new libretto to create an entirely different work. In 2016, Victorian Opera, together with Musica Viva, and in association with the performance program of the Australian Research Council Centre of Excellence for the History of Emotions, created and presented Voyage to the Moon, a new work true to the original pasticcio genre. It features music composed by Vivaldi, Handel and Gluck, to name a few, with a story based on a section of the 16th century epic poem Orlando Furioso, written by Ludovico Ariosto. Voyage to the Moon also toured to most Australian capital cities, and audiences were invited to participate in the associating research project that would track their emotional experience throughout the performance. In this episode, I'm joined by the work's writer and director, Michael Gow, the lead researcher in the audience research project, Jane Davidson, and singer Emma Matthews, to discuss the creation of the work and how modern audiences responded to the style. What is a pasticcio or a pastiche opera?
Well, it's a kind of literal meaning is a hodgepodge. It's just a mix together of different elements. And in fact, we use them all the time now in these kind of reviews or highlights from shows or compilations. And many forms of music use that pasticcio way of mixing things together. And in the 18th century, it was really a very popular style. It was a way of quickly assembling works and then stringing a kind of narrative on top of that with the music, often to showcase a singer, or just because the production of opera or music theatre works was so great and intense. It was a very rapid way for composers to do that. And in fact, composition is about repurposing anyway. Many composers repurpose elements of their work, and I'm sure Michael would speak to this as a writer as well. Of course, writers do the same. They take components, ideas, germs, and build them. And this was a way for composers, particularly Handel was very good at doing that. And many of his works reappear in slightly varied forms. So that's what pasticcio is.
So when putting a pasticcio opera together, what comes first? Do you select the music or do you develop a storyline?
In this example, I think we started with the story, with the plot line and the basic concept. And we also had the parameters, which was three singers, basically, a high soprano, a mezzo, and a bass baritone. And then it started as a kind of collaboration with Alan Curtis to begin with. And I would describe a particular number, an aria, or any kind of big recitative in kind of bold terms, and then Alan would suggest a range of pieces of music that would fit that. So, for example, at one stage, there's always a kind of a rage or a furious aria, and I said, I think at this point she should sound like a completely demented Queen of the Night. And Alan came back with a couple of arias, and then we tossed them backwards and forwards, and he would send me the first page of a score and I'd kind of pick it out on the piano, and if there was a YouTube recording of it, I'd listen, and then we'd pick on that. So that was basically how it proceeded. And then sadly we lost Alan kind of 2/3 of the way through the process. So then it was all up to me, and then Richard Mills came in and we talked about what would be right. And then at one point Richard actually wrote a duet for it as well, in the style of, which was amazing. But I think generally the idea of picking, I mean, there was, as Jane said, there was at the time a great sense of, well, that's a great tune, let's not pass that up. So you'd find a way of kind of whacking it into the work you were putting together anyway. And the range of plots was fairly limited and well known. So it would either be Ariosto or a classical myth or Tasso that you'd get the plot from anyway. So it was largely a stringing together of numbers based on the particular plot elements you'd already chosen.
So how did the development of the libretto unfold throughout the writing process?
It was a bit like a film script in that I did the basic pitch, and then I did a kind of synopsis, and then I did a kind of detailed scene by scene. And when everyone was happy with that, because there were issues like don't exhaust one singer. You can't do 4 arias in a row. You can't have one doing 9 and another doing 2. So there were all those logistical issues. Once we'd all agreed on that, then I began work on the actual text, which I think partly why I was offered the job was that I'd already been doing at Opera Australia. I did the 3 big Mozart operas in each genre, doing the English libretto and then directing them. So it was known that I had a kind of reasonable skill at doing that kind of work. So, but it was very much a collaborative process with Richard and Alan and Phoebe, the music director, making sure that it fitted the syllabic count and no one was doing those huge coloratura runs on really ugly sounds, and rhymes weren't too obvious. But this kind of material isn't so much about rhyming, thank goodness, because Italian music, because Italian is a Romance language, so it's got all those weak endings, it's really hard to get into English. So there was lots of kind of rejigging and rethinking, and you can't have a person singing 24 bars on that noise. So it was really only in the duets when people were singing together, they all had to land on the same vowel sound. So it went from incredibly broad brushstrokes down to, line endings over the, I guess, was it a year, Jane, that it took, I guess?
Pretty much, wasn't it? Yes.
Voyage to the Moon explores the relationship between Baroque music and the communication of emotion. When sourcing the music for the opera, were you looking for music that exhibited characteristics or musical devices that would evoke certain emotions or moods?
I think what was interesting for us, because we were looking at this project as a kind of research exploration about how it would be to take these really stock musical references to emotion. So at the period, they had things, as Michael's already mentioned, like there's a sleep aria, for instance. There are kind of rage arias, depictions of different kinds of moods, and also incredible showcases for the individual singers. So what was of interest to us was how do two modern day artists collaborate, or in the end it was a team, as Michael explained. How do they collaborate and produce something that is satisfying and artistically whole for them, but that references these tropes, these things from the past and make them work. And so, as Michael said, there were all kinds of kind of pragmatic decisions they had to make about not tiring the singers. For instance, one singer was double cast. She had not double cast, she had two separate roles. And so she couldn't sing really ornate, elaborate, florid music in one aria, go and change costume, and then come straight in and wham away with the next aria. So there were all those kind of contingencies in place. And it was really just fascinating to see how these arias were not only repurposed, but how people responded to them in the audience. And of course, we're very good at doing that because that sound world isn't foreign to us. I mean, peculiarly, we're more familiar to listening to music from the 18th and 19th century than we are very contemporaneous classical music anyway. So that was what we were interested in. And it was fascinating, and doing things like were practiced at the time of using very famous arias and how they fitted into that context now. That kind of issue.
Did you find anything interesting out of the research you did with the audience? Because I understand there was some surveying done afterwards.
Yes, we did lots of different things. We asked people about their experience, how familiar they were with this kind of music. Would they come again? What was the emotional high point for them? And there were some commonalities in those kinds of moments, to do with, after so much tension building in the story, the moment of release and, the solving of the problem when he got his sanity back. That moment musically is just exquisite, and many people talked about that and the fact that it brought tears to their eyes and they had a real visceral emotional response, which of course also historically is very interesting for us. Again, in the theatre, it's well reported that, sort of in the Shakespearean period forward, people had a particular cultural practice of how they behaved in the theatre. And fainting, for instance, was quite a common thing. People would get overwhelmed by the emotion. Now, we regulate our emotions a lot more in public spaces, but nonetheless, people were deeply and profoundly affected, which, of course, is also fascinating. So kind of contextualizing that and talking to people how they experience the work.
So, Emma, what characters did you play in Voyage to the Moon?
Well, I played two roles. I played Orlando, and I played Selena, the guardian of the moon. So that was quite thrilling, actually, to have the opportunity to play two different characters in a production, and the costume changes were so quick. It was like, which really helped with the manicness of Orlando at the end of the opera. That very quick costume change back into him. It was very, very thrilling, though, and nice to go from the big grand costume back to the boy or the young man. Yeah.
So what was your experience like working on the production in sort of the rehearsal room? Were you and the other singers contributing to the development of the libretto?
Yes, in the rehearsal room, we were very fortunate because we had a workshop a little bit earlier, and then we went into the rehearsal process. And it was also a matter of because it was a pastiche of different composers all put together, finding pieces that really worked sort of along with the story that Michael Gower had created. So there was a bit of, I don't think we actually shifted numbers around. I don't think we got to that point, but certainly the writing of ornaments and things like that was very collaborative. And it wasn't much text change, because Michael Gough's such a wonderful librettist. That was pretty much what we did. But we did twist a couple of words here and there, just and put all the coloratura runs on for instance, which is a lot easier and traditional. So there was a bit of adapting of that sort of thing. But it was very much, we were all there at the same time. It was a lovely process of, the musicianship was so important with somebody like, Phoebe Briggs at the helm. The detail was absolutely fantastic that we all dived into. And having the opportunity to work with Sally Ann, who's a great mate, and young baritone Jeremy Kleeman, who'd I'd actually adjudicated in the Australian singing competition a couple of years before, to have the chance to work with them in such a tight-knit project was really, really wonderful.
Baroque music is incredibly emotional, but is confined to a fairly strict compositional styles and rules. How do you communicate the emotions that's in the music in your performance?
Communicating the emotions in performance in a Baroque piece it's very much about respecting what the composer has written, like looking at the dynamics, looking at the tempi. And then when you have your da capo sections, adding in those ornaments and more florid passages that give you as an artist the opportunity to put your own emotion and virtuosity into the music. I love it. And, certainly I've done a fair bit of Handel in my day. Not many of the other early Baroque composers, but a lot of Handel. And it's a wonderful feeling to just be free and let out your the runs and the fire within the character.
So the relationship between the singers and the orchestra seems closer in a Baroque opera, especially in this piece as the orchestra was on the stage. And, the melodic line is doubled up in both the vocal and instrumental parts. Do you spend much time with the orchestral musicians to ensure that what you're saying musically is the same, especially in the fast coloratura passages?
Yeah, we did. We had a lot of ensemble time, and certainly when we were blocking the show, we would work with the chamber orchestra, and really everybody had some input. Every player and all of us, and it was very detailed, the preparation. And I think that's why it was such a triumph musically, was because we had the most incredible musicians in the ensemble, and all of whom became dear friends, and we became very close. And there's that thing about working with each other and touring with each other and creating music where you just, there's an intimacy in that so we became a family. It was really lovely. And we all knew when somebody would slightly do something a little bit different and go, but we were all able to catch each other as well. So it was really quite exhilarating.
What do you think was your favourite part, or what did you enjoy most about this opera and working on it?
You know what? My favourite part was actually when I wasn't singing and when Sally Ann was doing her aria. And I was there, she was singing to me, and I was like stomping past her. And I was just going, wow, 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 every time she sang a phrase. It was really wonderful to have those moments within the production that weren't pressure on me. So just, and she's so fantastic. She's just the queen of Baroque repertoire in this country, and so inspiring. And I try to put her off occasionally, but she never she was really focused.
That's good.
Yeah, she's one. I think that was my highlight for me, just listening to her. And yeah, amazing.
Well, there you have it. Thank you to Michael, Jane, and Emma for joining me in today's episode and for sharing their insights and memories on creating Voyage to the Moon. Next time, we take a look at some of the set and costume designs that have brought Victorian Opera's new commissions to life on stage. Until then, take care.